He was just a quiet single father repairing vintage furniture at an exclusive corporate gala. But when he saw the tech CEO reach for her briefcase, something in his teenage son's urgent whisper made him drop everything and shout 4 words that would stop an assassination and unravel a conspiracy worth billions. Sometimes it's the voices no one listens to that save everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The crystal chandeliers of the Sterling Innovation Center cast diamond patterns across marble floors as Silicon Valley's elite mingled beneath vaulted ceilings. The annual Tech Visionaries Gala drew billionaires, venture capitalists, and innovators from across the country, all gathered to celebrate breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Champagne flutes clinked against the backdrop of a string quartet, and the air hummed with deals being made in hushed tones between appetizer courses. Lorian Dravik wasn't one of the guests. He was there to work, dressed in work boots and a clean button-down shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. Lorian knelt beside an antique mahogany display case near the main stage, carefully adjusting its brass hinges. The case would hold the evening's centerpiece, a prototype quantum processor worth an estimated $3 billion. His weathered hands, scarred from years of carpentry and military service before that, moved with practiced precision. Beside him sat his 16-year-old son, Kai. Not by blood, but by every measure of commitment that mattered. Kai was lean and observant, with dark hair that fell across sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wore noise-canceling headphones pushed back around his neck and held a tablet displaying the case's original 1890s blueprints. He'd been diagnosed with acute sensory processing sensitivity at age 7, which meant crowded rooms like this one overwhelmed him quickly, but he'd insisted on coming tonight. Something about the event made him uneasy, though he couldn't articulate why. Lorian tightened the final screw and stepped back, examining his work. "That should hold it," he said quietly. Kai didn't respond. His eyes were fixed across the ballroom, tracking something Lorian couldn't see yet. The crowd parted as Talise Corvain took the stage. At 38, she was the youngest CEO of a Fortune 100 tech company, her innovations in secure data encryption having revolutionized cybersecurity. Tonight, she wore an elegant navy suit, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her presence commanding without effort. She smiled at the crowd, gracious and composed, every inch the visionary leader the world believed her to be. "Thank you all for coming," Talise began, her voice carrying across the space with practiced ease. "Tonight, we celebrate not just innovation, but the courage to imagine what others say is impossible." The crowd applauded. Kai's grip tightened on his tablet. "Dad," he whispered, voice thin as thread. "Something's wrong." Lorian crouched beside him immediately, following his gaze. "What do you see?" Her assistant, the one who just handed her the briefcase. "Watch her hands." Lorian turned his attention to the woman standing stage left. Nadira Queleth had been Talise's executive assistant for 3 years, known for her efficiency and unwavering loyalty. She stood now with perfect posture, hands clasped in front of her, the picture of professionalism. But Kai was right. Something was off. "Her thumb," Kai continued, barely audible. "It's pressing the briefcase clasp. 3 short presses too long. That's not nervous habit. That's a sequence." Lorian's military training snapped into focus. Pattern recognition. Deliberate action disguised as coincidence. He'd seen it in Kandahar, in situations where one wrong move meant casualties. Talise reached for the briefcase, her fingers closing around the leather handle. Lorian didn't think. He moved. "Don't open that case." His voice cut through the ballroom like a blade, sharp and commanding. Every head turned. The string quartet faltered. Talise froze, briefcase in hand, eyes wide as she located the source of the disruption. Lorian was already moving toward the stage. Kai closed behind him. Security guards stepped forward, but something in Lorien's bearing, the focused intensity of a man who'd spent years in combat zones, made them hesitate. "The briefcase," Lorien called out, his voice steady and clear. "Don't open it." The assistant triggered something. Nadira's face transformed in an instant. The professional mask shattered, replaced by cold calculation. Her hand moved to her jacket pocket, but Tallis had already set the briefcase down, stepping back from it with the quick intelligence that had built her empire. "Nadira?" Her voice carried disbelief and dawning horror. Nadira's jaw tightened. Then she ran. She bolted stage right, shoving past a waiter and sending a tray of champagne glasses crashing to the floor. Security mobilized instantly, 2 guards pursuing her through the kitchen doors, while others moved to secure the briefcase. Lorien reached the stage just as the bomb squad arrived, summoned by security the moment his warning registered. A technician in full gear approached the briefcase with careful deliberation, scanning it with handheld equipment. The room had erupted into controlled chaos. Guests were being evacuated through side exits. Tech executives who'd been laughing moments ago now pressed phones to their ears, faces tight with concern. The quantum processor was being secured in a blast-resistant container, hustled away by personnel with earpieces and grim expressions. Tallis stood frozen center stage, staring at the briefcase that had nearly killed her. Her hands trembled slightly, the only visible crack in her composure. The bomb technician looked up, his face visible through the blast shield. "It's live," he confirmed. Pressure-triggered explosive device. Would have detonated the moment she opened the latch. Sophisticated work, probably military grade. Murmurs rippled through the remaining crowd. Someone gasped. A reporter who'd been covering the event started filming before security confiscated his phone. Lorien turned to find Kai standing beside him, pale but steady, his tablet clutched against his chest like a shield. The boy who struggled in crowds, who needed careful routines and quiet spaces to function, had just saved hundreds of lives by noticing what no one else saw. "You okay?" Lorien asked quietly. Kai nodded, then whispered, "Is she?" They both looked at Tallis. She was staring at them now, her dark eyes moving from Lorien to Kai and back again, trying to comprehend what had just happened. A federal agent appeared, flashing credentials. "We need statements from both of you. And ma'am," he addressed Tallis, "we need you to come with us. This is now an active investigation." Tallis nodded mechanically, but her gaze remained fixed on Lorien and Kai. She crossed the stage toward them, security flanking her, and stopped directly in front of the man who just saved her life. "Who are you?" Her voice was steady, but Lorien could hear the tremor beneath it, the shock trying to break through. "Lorien Dravok. I was hired to restore the display case. And you?" She looked at Kai. The teenager met her eyes, unflinching despite the sensory chaos surrounding them. "Kai, I notice patterns. When they're wrong, I say something." Tallis's throat worked as she swallowed hard. "You saved my life. Both of you. I don't even know how to begin thanking you." "Don't thank us yet," Lorien said, his tone measured. "Your assistant got away." "This might not be over," the federal agent interrupted. "We have her in custody. Tried to exit through the service entrance. She's being transported now." Relief flickered across Tallis's face, followed quickly by confusion and hurt. "Why? Nadira's been with me for 3 years. She had access to everything. If she wanted to hurt me, she could have done it 1,000 different ways." The agent's expression was carefully neutral. "We'll find out. Right now we need to secure you and debrief these witnesses." As they were led towards separate interview areas, Tallis looked back once more at Lorien and Kai. The CEO who commanded boardrooms and disrupted industries looked, for just a moment, completely lost. Kai tugged his father's sleeve. "She's going to be alone now. When the shock wears off, she needs someone." Lorien looked down at his son. This remarkable young man who saw the world differently than everyone else, and somehow saw it more clearly because of it. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She will." The gala had ended in sirens and flashing lights, in shattered champagne glasses and unanswered questions. But something else had begun too, though none of them knew it yet. A connection forged in crisis. A recognition that would reshape all three of their lives. Sometimes salvation comes from the voices no one expects to hear. From the furniture restorer nobody notices and the teenager everyone underestimates. From those who see patterns where others see only noise, and who speak up even when their voices shake. Tonight, those voices had changed everything. The federal building's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the interrogation room where Lorien had spent the last 4 hours recounting every detail of the evening. The questions came in waves, methodical and thorough, from agents who needed to understand how a civilian furniture restorer had identified a threat their own security had missed. In the adjacent room, Kai sat with a victim advocate and a senior agent trained in working with neurodivergent witnesses. They'd quickly learned that Kai's detailed observations, when given space and time to articulate them, were extraordinarily precise. He'd noticed Nadira's pattern 3 minutes before Talise reached for the briefcase. He'd tracked her behavioral changes throughout the evening, the way she'd positioned herself, the micro-expressions that crossed her face when she thought. No one was watching, the deliberate thumb sequence on the briefcase clasp. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Your son has an exceptional gift," Agent Morrison said as he closed his laptop. "Pattern recognition at that level is rare. The Bureau has psychologists who'd love to understand how his mind works." Lorien's expression hardened slightly. "He's not a case study. He's a person who sees what others miss, because the world forces him to pay closer attention just to navigate it." Morrison raised his hands in a placating gesture. "No offense intended. I'm just saying, what he did tonight saved lives. A lot of them. I know what he did." Lorien's voice was quiet but firm. "I also know that every time someone calls him special or gifted, what they really mean is useful. He's not a tool. He's my son." The agent nodded slowly, making a note. "Understood. You're free to go. We'll be in touch if we need additional testimony. There's someone waiting for you in the lobby." Lorien found Kai first, reuniting with him near the elevator. The teenager looked exhausted, the kind of deep fatigue that came from hours of overstimulation and high stress. His headphones were back on, creating a buffer against the harsh sounds of the government building. "Ready to go home?" Lorien asked. Kai nodded, then paused. "She's here, downstairs, waiting." They took the elevator to the main lobby, a cavernous space of polished granite and security checkpoints. Tallis Corvain stood near the far wall, flanked by 2 private security personnel who hadn't been there at the gala. She'd changed from her elegant suit into jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. Without the stage presence and CEO armor, she looked younger, more vulnerable. When she saw them, she crossed the lobby quickly, her security detail following at a respectful distance. "They told me you were still here," she said, her voice lacking the confident resonance from earlier. "I wanted to wait. To thank you properly." Lorien shook his head. "No thanks necessary. Anyone would have done the same, but they didn't." Tallis's eyes were intense, searching his face. 300 people in that ballroom, including a dozen security professionals, and no one saw what your son saw. No one acted the way you did. Kai shifted uncomfortably, the attention clearly wearing on him. Tallis noticed immediately. "I'm sorry," she said, softening her tone. "This is overwhelming. I just needed to see you both, to know you were real. The last few hours have felt surreal." "Did they tell you why?" Lorien asked. "Why she did it?" Tallis's expression darkened. Industrial espionage, they think. Nadira was being paid by a competitor to steal the quantum processor specifications. When that failed, the plan shifted to elimination. Remove me, destabilize the company, crash the stock price. Someone stands to make billions in short positions. That's cold. That's business. Talis's laugh was bitter. Or at least, that's what I've been telling myself for the last 4 hours. The truth is, I trusted her, completely. She knew my schedule, my security protocols, my vulnerabilities. I never questioned her loyalty because she seemed so devoted. She paused, blinking rapidly. I built my entire company on identifying security risks, and I never saw the one sitting 3 feet from my desk. Kai spoke suddenly, his voice quiet but clear. You couldn't see it because you weren't supposed to. That's how infiltration works. They become what you expect, so you stop looking. Talis turned to him, surprised. You understand this? This kind of deception? I understand patterns, Kai said. When someone's trying to hide something, they overcorrect. They become too perfect at being normal. Nadira's pattern tonight was too precise. Every movement calculated. That's what caught my attention. How old are you? Talis asked gently. 16. She shook her head slowly, a mixture of admiration and disbelief crossing her face. 16, and you see what trained professionals miss. That's remarkable. Kai's discomfort increased. Lorien placed a hand on his shoulder, a grounding gesture. It's been a long night. We should get home. Of course. Talis reached into her bag, pulling out a business card. Not her corporate card with the embossed logo and executive title, but a simple white card with only a phone number handwritten across it. This is my personal line. If you need anything at all, please call. I mean that. Lorien took the card, studying it for a moment. You don't owe us anything. I owe you my life. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. That's not a debt I take lightly. As they turned to leave, Talis called out once more. Lorien? Kai? They looked back. I don't know if you follow the news, but this is going to be everywhere by morning. Reporters, attention, questions. If it becomes too much, if you need somewhere away from it all, please reach out. I have resources. I can help. Lorien nodded once, acknowledging the offer, then guided Kai toward the exit. The night air hit them like a shock of cold water, clean and sharp after hours in the sterile federal building. Lorien's truck sat in the parking lot, a battered Ford with mismatched panels and a temperamental starter. It felt like returning to reality after being suspended in someone else's world. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes, the city lights of Ashford Heights giving way to quieter suburbs. Finally, Kai pulled off his headphones. She's going to be alone, he said, echoing his earlier observation from the gala. She has security, resources, she'd be fine. That's not what I mean. Kai stared out the window. She's going to be surrounded by people, but she's going to be alone. Everyone will want something from her now. Statements, decisions, reassurance. No one's going to ask if she's okay. Lorien glanced at his son, this young man who processed the world through patterns and logic, but somehow understood human emotion with startling clarity. You worried about her? Aren't you? Lorien's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It's not our job to worry about a tech CEO. We did what needed doing. Now we go back to our lives. But even as he said it, Lorien knew it wasn't that simple. He'd seen the look in Talis's eyes when she realized her trust had been weaponized against her. He recognized it because he'd worn that same expression years ago, in a different context, when his own world had shattered. They pulled into the driveway of their modest home in the Oakmont district, a neighborhood of working families and small yards. The porch light was on, just as Lorien had left it. Inside, everything was exactly as they'd left it this morning. Kai's engineering textbooks spread across the dining table. Lorien's restoration project, sketches pinned to the wall. 2 coffee mugs in the sink from breakfast. Normal, Safe. Home. Kai went straight to his room, needing the quiet and familiar space to decompress. Lorien stood in the kitchen, Talise's card still in his hand, and thought about patterns of his own. The pattern of keeping his distance, of not getting involved, of protecting the small life he'd built with Kai after so much had been lost. But patterns could be broken. Sometimes they needed to be. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Tech CEO Thales Corvain survives assassination attempt at gala. Assistant arrested. Furniture restorer and his son credited with saving her life. The media storm had begun. By morning, their names would be everywhere. Privacy gone. Questions endless. Their quiet life disrupted. Lorien looked at the card again, at the handwritten number, an offer of help. But also, perhaps, an acknowledgement of something else. A connection forged not just by crisis, but by recognition. She'd seen them, really seen them, in a way few people ever did. He set the card on the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a compass. A reminder that sometimes the right direction isn't always the safe one. Tomorrow would bring chaos. But tonight, in the stillness of his kitchen, Lorien allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they weren't done with Thales Corvain yet. And more importantly, if she wasn't done with them, the headlines hit exactly as Talise had predicted. By sunrise, every major news outlet carried the story. Furniture restorer stops assassination. Teen's observation saves tech CEO's life. Security failure at Innovation Gala. Lorien's phone started ringing at 6 in the morning and didn't stop. Reporters camped outside their house. Local news vans blocked the street. Neighbors who'd never spoken to them suddenly appeared with casseroles and questions. Kai lasted until noon before the overstimulation became unbearable. Lorien found him, in his room, headphones on, wrapped in a weighted blanket, trembling from sensory overload. "We need to leave," Lorien said quietly, making the decision instantly. "Pack a bag. Essentials only." They left through the back door, cutting through the neighbor's yard to where Lorien had strategically parked his truck 2 blocks away. By the time the reporters realized they were gone, Lorien and Kai were already on the highway heading north toward the mountain town of Pine Haven, where Lorien kept a small workshop for specialized restoration projects. His phone rang again. This time, it was the handwritten number from the card. "Lorien?" Talise's voice was strained. "Are you okay? I've been watching the news. They're outside your house. We left. Heading to a workshop I have up north." Kai couldn't handle the chaos. A pause. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. The media attention, the scrutiny. I should have anticipated this. You can't control what happened. No, but I can help now." Her tone shifted, becoming more decisive. "Where's your workshop?" "Pine Haven. About 90 miles north of the city. I know it. There's a private estate nearby, the Thornfield property. It's been sitting empty for months while the owner's overseas. I was considering acquiring it for a company retreat." She paused. "It has security, privacy, space. Let me make some calls. You and Kai can stay there until this dies down." Lorien's instinct was to refuse, to maintain the careful distance he'd built around their lives. But he looked in the rearview mirror at Kai, still pale, still recovering from the morning's assault on his senses, and made a different choice. "Okay," he said simply. "Thank you. I'll text you the address and gate code. Give me 3 hours to arrange things." True to her word, 3 hours later, Lorien pulled up to an iron gate set in a stone wall, pine trees creating a natural barrier on all sides. He entered the code Talise had sent, and the gate swung open to reveal a winding drive leading to a sprawling estate that somehow managed to look both grand and welcoming. The house was timber and stone, built to complement the mountain landscape rather than dominate it. Large windows reflected the surrounding forest. A wraparound porch suggested quiet mornings with coffee. Smoke curled from one of the chimneys, indicating someone had already prepared for their arrival. Tallis herself opened the door. Before they reached it, she looked different here, away from the corporate world and federal buildings. She wore comfortable clothes, her hair pulled back simply, and there was a softness to her expression that hadn't been there before. Behind her, the interior was warm and inviting. Exposed beams, comfortable furniture, a fire crackling in a stone fireplace. "Welcome," she said. "I hope this works." The caretaker stocked the kitchen and got the fireplaces going. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs, all with their own bathrooms. Take whichever ones feel right. Kai stood frozen on the porch, taking in the new environment, processing the change. Tallis noticed immediately. "Would you like to see this space before deciding?" She asked him directly, her voice gentle. "I find new places overwhelming too sometimes. It helps to explore them on my own terms first." Kai looked at her with surprise, then nodded. "The house is yours," she continued. "Explore at your own pace. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." As Kai disappeared inside, beginning his careful assessment of the space, Lorien turned to Tallis. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." She met his eyes steadily. "You saved my life, and in return, the world I live in made yours unlivable. This is the least I can do. How long can we stay?" "As long as you need. The property's been empty for 6 months. Consider it yours." She paused. "I'm staying too, actually. My security team thought it best I disappear for a few days while they investigate the full extent of Nadira's network. Turns out, you're not the only one hiding from reporters." Lorien studied her, seeing past the CEO facade to the woman beneath. "You're not used to being the one who needs protection." "No," she admitted. "I'm used to being in control. This feels like free fall." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the mountain air cool and pine-scented around them. Then Tallis smiled slightly. "I should warn you, I'm not great at doing nothing. I get restless. So if I start reorganizing your workshop or trying to optimize the kitchen layout, please stop me. You know where my workshop is? It's the converted barn behind the house. I noticed the tools when I arrived earlier," she shrugged. "Old habit. I assess spaces, look for inefficiencies, see possibilities. Occupational hazard of being an engineer before I was a CEO." "You were an engineer?" "Electrical engineering, MAT. Built my first encryption algorithm in a dorm room with borrowed equipment." Her expression turned wistful. "Sometimes I miss it. The work. Getting my hands dirty with actual problems instead of managing people who manage problems." Lorien surprised himself by saying, "I have a restoration project in the barn. Early 1900s writing desk, water damaged. Needs someone with steady hands and patience. If you get restless, you're welcome to help." Tallis's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Really? Really? Fair warning, it's detail work, tedious. Most people find it boring. Most people," she said, "never built circuit boards at 3 in the morning because they couldn't stop thinking about a problem. I think I can handle tedious." Over the next few days, an unexpected rhythm developed. Mornings were quiet, each of them emerging from their rooms at different times, respecting the need for space and routine. Kai claimed the room with the best natural light, setting up his tablet and textbooks, creating a mobile study space. Tallis took the smallest bedroom, explaining that she'd lived in a studio apartment during her startup years and still found large spaces unsettling. Lorien kept the master suite, mainly because it had direct access to the back porch and the barn workshop. Afternoons found them in the barn, working on the writing desk. Tallis proved to have a gift for the meticulous work, her engineering background translating perfectly to restoration. She learned to assess wood grain, to understand how moisture damage spread through joints, to feel the difference between solid wood and veneer with just her fingertips. "This is meditative," she said one afternoon, carefully applying wood filler to a cracked panel. My mind's been running at 1,000 miles per hour since the gala. This is the first time it's slowed down. Lorien worked beside her, sanding another section with practice strokes. That's what I love about this work. It demands presence. You can't think about tomorrow's problems while you're trying to match a grain pattern from 1907. Is that why you do it? The presence? He considered the question. Partly. Also because I like fixing things that people think are beyond repair. Showing them that with enough patience and care, what looked broken can become whole again. Talise set down her tools, looking at him with new understanding. That's not just about furniture, is it? No, Lorien said quietly. It's not. She didn't push, didn't ask for the story behind the words. Instead, she simply nodded and returned to her work. The comfortable silence between them speaking volumes. Kai spent much of his time exploring the property, cataloging the patterns he found in nature, the way water flowed through the creek, the territorial behaviors of the local ravens, the geometric precision of spider webs in the morning dew. But each evening, he joined them in the main house for dinner. Meals they took turns preparing. It was during one of these dinners that Kai asked the question that had been hanging unspoken between them. What happens when we go back? Tallis and Lorien exchanged glances. The media will move on eventually, Tallis said. They always do. Another story will grab their attention. But things won't be the same, Kai pressed. Everyone knows who we are now. Our quiet life, it's gone. Lorien reached across the table, placing his hand over his son's. Then we build a new kind of quiet. Different, but still ours. What if I don't want different? Kai's voice was small, vulnerable. What if I just want things back the way they were? Tallis spoke gently. I understand that. I want my old life back too, in some ways. The version where I could trust people, where I felt safe in my own company. But we can't go backward. We can only go forward and decide what we bring with us. What are you bringing? Kai asked. She thought for a moment. Caution, I suppose. But also something I didn't have before. A reminder that the people you don't expect often see what everyone else misses. That's valuable. That's worth holding on to. Kai looked between them. These two adults who'd somehow become constants in his life over just a few days. Are we friends now? Tallis's expression softened. I'd like to be. If you'll have me. Friends are patterns too, Kai said thoughtfully. They show up repeatedly. They're consistent. Are you going to be consistent? Yes, Tallis said without hesitation. I am. Lorien felt something shift in his chest. A wall he'd maintained for years developing its first cracks. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were supposed to save her, disappear back into their lives, remain safely separate from her world of wealth and influence and complexity. But life, he was learning, rarely respected the boundaries you drew. That night, after Kai had gone to bed, Lorien found Talise on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. Can't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair beside her. Too much quiet, she said with a wry smile. I'm used to city noise, the hum of servers, the ping of notifications. This level of peace is almost overwhelming. You'll adjust. Will I? She turned to look at him. Or will I go back to the city and forget what this feels like? Forget that there's more to life than quarterly earnings and market share, and staying 3 steps ahead of the competition? Is that a question for me or for yourself? Both, maybe. She pulled the blanket tighter. I've spent 15 years building my company. It's been everything, my purpose, my identity, my family. And in one night, I realized how fragile it all is. How easily it could be taken away, it all is. How easily it could be taken away. But it wasn't taken away. Only because of you and Kai. Her voice dropped. What does it say about my life that 2 strangers cared more about my survival than someone I trusted for 3 years? Lorien didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he offered what he could. Betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. Nadira made her choices. That's not a reflection of your worth. Spoken like someone who's experienced it. He nodded slowly. Different context. But yes, want to talk about it? Not tonight. He stood, preparing to head inside. But maybe sometime. When the quiet's not so overwhelming, Tallis smiled up at him. I'll hold you to that. As Lorien returned to his room, he realized something had changed. The boundaries he'd drawn, the careful distance he'd maintained, they were dissolving. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually. Like water finding its way through stone dot, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if that was something to fear or something to welcome. That morning arrived soft and golden, sunlight filtering through the pines and casting dappled patterns across the workshop floor. Lorien stood at the workbench, the writing desk's restoration nearly complete, its original beauty emerging from beneath decades of damage. He ran his hand across the newly refinished surface, feeling the smoothness, the integrity of the wood restored. The barn door creaked open, and Tallis entered carrying 2 mugs of coffee, her hair still damp from a shower. Peace offering, she said, setting 1 mug beside him. I may have reorganized your tool wall last night. I couldn't sleep, and efficiency was calling to me. I'm sorry. I know it's invasive. Lorien looked at the wall where his tools hung. What had been his comfortable chaos was now pristine organization, tools grouped by function, sized sequentially, each one perfectly spaced. He should have been annoyed. Instead, he found himself smiling. The chisels are grouped by width progression, he observed, descending left to right for intuitive reach. Patterns, she confirmed, looking slightly embarrassed. I have a problem, you have a gift. This is actually better than my system, which was mostly, I think I left it somewhere around here. He picked up his coffee. Thank you. For the organization and the coffee. She relaxed visibly, leaning against the workbench. I used to do this in my first office. Late nights when I couldn't shut my brain off. I'd reorganize everything, optimize workflows, redesign systems. My business partner said I was either going to revolutionize tech or drive everyone insane trying. Which did you do? Both, probably. She traced a finger along the desk's restored edge. This piece is beautiful. You brought it back from ruin. We brought it back, he corrected. That veneer repair on the drawer front? That was all you. I would have replaced it. You figured out how to save it. It felt wrong to replace something original when it could be healed. She paused. Maybe I was projecting. Lorien set down his mug. Want to talk about it? Tallis was quiet for a long moment. Then she began. I built my company on trust. Not just customer trust, but internal trust. I wanted to create a culture where people felt safe, where loyalty mattered, where we were a team. I thought Nadira embodied that. She'd been with me from the early days, worked late hours, anticipated my needs, protected my time. I trusted her with everything, and she used that trust as a weapon. Exactly. Tallis's voice tightened. The federal agents told me she'd been compromised for at least a year, feeding information to competitors, setting up the conditions for my removal. Everything she did, every kindness, every act of loyalty, it was all calculated. I keep replaying moments, trying to figure out when she turned. Or if she was ever really on my side at all. You're questioning your judgment. I'm questioning everything. She looked at him directly. How do you trust again after something like that? How do you let people close when closeness is what almost killed you? Lorien leaned back against the workbench, considering his words carefully. You want the honest answer or the comfortable one? Honest, always. You don't trust the same way again. You can't. That version of trust, the blind kind, that's gone. But you can build a different kind. One that's eyes open, aware. You learn to see the patterns like Kai does. You watch for inconsistencies. And you accept that trust is a risk you take consciously, not a gift you give blindly. Tallis absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. That sounds exhausting. It is at first. But it becomes second nature. And eventually, you find people who prove themselves consistently enough that the watching becomes less vigilant. You relax into it carefully. He paused. That's where I am with Kai. He's seen me at my worst, and he stayed. That kind of trust, the earned kind, it's stronger than the blind kind ever was. He's not your biological son, is he? No, I was his emergency foster placement 4 years ago. His caseworker called me because she was desperate, and I was the only approved single father in the system with military medical training. Kai had just been removed from a home where he'd been neglected because his sensory needs were seen as difficult. He was 12, completely shut down, wouldn't speak, wouldn't make eye contact. Lorian's voice softened with memory. I was only supposed to have him for 2 weeks while they found a permanent placement. What changed? He did, or rather I did. I saw past the silence to what he was actually communicating. He wasn't difficult. He was drowning in a world that didn't accommodate how he processed information. So I changed the world, at least his small corner of it. Noise-canceling headphones, visual schedules, weighted blankets, spaces where he could decompress. And slowly he emerged. Started talking, started trusting, and you adopted him? Took 18 months to navigate the system. They kept saying a single man with PTSD wasn't suitable for a special needs placement. I kept showing up at hearings with documentation of Kai's progress, letters from his therapist, evidence that he was thriving. Finally, a judge asked Kai directly where he wanted to be. He said, "With my dad, that was it. Done." Tullis's eyes glistened. That's beautiful. It's family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose. The kind you build deliberately, with full knowledge of each other's broken pieces. She wiped her eyes quickly, almost embarrassed by the emotion. I don't have that. Family, I mean. My parents died when I was in college. Car accident. I threw myself into work, into building the company. It became my family. And now I'm realizing how hollow that is. Lorian moved closer, his voice gentle. It's not hollow. It's incomplete. There's a difference. What you built matters. It just can't be everything. What else is there? This, he said simply, gesturing to the space between them. Connection. The kind that isn't transactional. That doesn't serve a purpose beyond itself. Tallis looked at him, vulnerability written across her features. I don't know how to do that. I've spent so long optimizing everything, making every relationship serve the business or the mission. How do I just connect? You already are. Right now. Being here, being honest, letting yourself be uncertain. That's connection. She laughed a bit watery. I hate being uncertain. I know. But uncertainty is where trust lives. In the space between knowing and controlling. They stood in the quiet workshop, sawdust motes floating in the morning light, years of carefully constructed defenses beginning to crumble for both of them. Kai appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, looking between them with his characteristic perceptiveness. You're both crying, he observed without judgment. We're processing, Tallis said, wiping her eyes again. That's good. Processing is how you integrate new patterns. He entered the workshop, examining the restored desk. This is finished? Just about, Lorian confirmed. Needs one more coat of wax and it's complete. Then we should celebrate. I found something while exploring the property. Kai pulled up an image on his tablet. It showed a clearing in the woods, a natural amphitheater formed by the curve of the land and a semicircle of old-growth pines. It's a quarter-mile north. The acoustics are perfect. I tested them. Sound carries and focuses naturally. Tallis leaned in to look. What are you thinking? Music, Kai said simply. I found an old guitar in the house. Dad plays. You said you used to sing in college. I thought maybe we could do something together. Mark this moment. Lorian and Tallis exchanged glances. I haven't played in years, Lorien said. I haven't sung since my parents died, Tallis added. I know, Kai replied. That's why you should. Not to perform. Just to exist together in a moment that's only ours. There was wisdom in his suggestion, the kind that came from seeing patterns others missed, including emotional ones. That afternoon, they gathered in Kai's discovered clearing. Lorien brought the guitar, its strings worn but functional. Tallis brought her uncertainty and her grief. Kai brought his tablet to record the moment, not for sharing but for remembering. Lorien's fingers found the strings awkwardly at first, muscle memory returning slowly. He played something simple, a melody his mother had taught him, something about mountains and home. Then Tallis sang. Her voice was untrained but true, carrying emotion more than technique. She sang about loss and discovery, about the people who save you and the ones who betray you, about finding home in unexpected places. Home in unexpected places. Kai sat cross-legged on the ground, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over him. This, his expression said, was what he'd needed. Not the silence of isolation, but the harmony of connection. When the last note faded, no one spoke. The forest held the sound for a moment, then released it gently. Thank you, Tallis whispered finally. I didn't realize how much I needed that. We all did. Lorien replied as they walked back to the house through dappled sunlight and pine shadows. Kai between them, something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer strangers bound by circumstance. They were people choosing each other, consciously and deliberately. That evening, they sat around the fireplace, the restored desk now placed in the living room as a centerpiece. Tallis ran her hand across its surface. What happens when we leave here? She asked. When we go back to real life? Lorien considered the question. We take this with us. The trust we're building. The connection. It doesn't have to end because the location changes. You make it sound simple. It's not. But it's possible. He looked at Kai, then back at Tallis. If we choose it, I want to choose it, Tallis said softly. I'm terrified, but I want to. Fear means it matters, Kai observed from his spot on the floor. You only fear losing things you value. Tallis smiled at him. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. People just started listening. They laughed, the sound filling the space with warmth. Outside, the mountain night settled in, stars emerging one by one. Inside, 3 people who'd found each other in crisis were discovering something more profound. The possibility of family, chosen and built with intention, the broken pieces of their separate lives were beginning to form a new pattern. Not seamless, not perfect, but whole in its own way. And that, they were learning, was enough. The morning started ordinary enough. Kai was in his room, working through advanced calculus problems he found more engaging than his actual schoolwork. Tallis was on a video call with her security team, getting updates on the investigation. Lorien was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast and mentally planning the day's work on a new piece that had arrived at his workshop the day before. A Victorian-era bookcase with severe structural damage. Then Kai's voice cut through the calm, sharp with urgency. Dad! Tallis, come here, now. They found him at his bedroom window, tablet pressed against the glass, his face pale. What is it? Lorien asked, immediately shifting into alert mode. Vehicle approaching. Black SUV, no plates visible from this angle. Driving pattern is deliberate, not casual. They've stopped at 3 different points along the perimeter road in the last 10 minutes. Kai's fingers flew across his tablet, pulling up what appeared to be a satellite view of the property. They're mapping security vulnerabilities. Tallis's expression hardened. My security team is 40 minutes away. They were doing a shift change. She pulled out her phone, then stopped. No signal. It was working 5 minutes ago. Jammer, Lorien said grimly. His military training was fully engaged now. They're cutting communications before they move in. He turned to Kai. How many people? I've seen at least 3 distinct heat signatures through the thermal view. Kai pulled up another app, showing heat patterns around the property. But there could be more. The SUV could hold 6 easily. Talissa's face was a mixture of fear and anger. This is about Nadira. It has to be. The people who hired her, finishing what she started. Maybe. Lorien was already moving, his mind calculating options. Or it's someone new taking advantage of the chaos. Either way, we need to assume hostile intent and act accordingly. What do we do? Tallis asked, her CEO composure cracking slightly. The panic room? That's the first place they'll look. Panic rooms are predictable. Lorien moved to the hallway, pulling down a panel in the ceiling that revealed a narrow attic space. Old estates like this, built in the 20s, they have features most people forget about. Service passages, hidden stairs, access points for maintenance. I noticed them when we arrived. You've been planning for this? Talissa's voice held a note of disbelief, force of habit. Always know your exits, always have a contingency. He turned to Kai. Can you track their movement from up there? Kai nodded, already moving toward the attic access with his tablet. I can monitor from anywhere with line of sight. The thermal app will show their positions even through walls. Good, you're our eyes. Tallis and I will navigate based on your guidance. Lorien looked at Tallis. Can you move quietly? I ran track in college. I can move. Then we move now. They climbed into the attic, Lorien pulling the panel closed behind them. The space was cramped but navigable, running the length of the house with occasional access points to different rooms. Kai immediately positioned himself near a small vent that offered a view of the driveway. They're out of the vehicle, he whispered. 4 people. 3 men, 1 woman. All armed. Professional stance, tactical movement. This isn't amateur hour. Through the floorboards, they heard the front door being tested, then a sharp crack as it was forced open. Footsteps entered below, measured and searching. Spread out, a male voice commanded. Check every room. They're here somewhere. Tallis's breathing quickened. Lorien placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. She met his eyes and nodded, regaining control. Kai's fingers moved across his tablet, tracking the heat signatures. 2 heading upstairs, 1 staying on the main floor, 1 moving toward the kitchen. He paused. Wait, there's a 5th signature. Outside, moving around the perimeter. They've got someone watching the exits. Smart, Lorien murmured. They're not taking chances. He looked around the attic, assessing their options. His eyes landed on an old service shaft, barely visible in the corner. What's that connect to? Kai pulled up the estate's original blueprints on his tablet. Old dumbwaiter shaft. Goes from the attic to the basement, with stops at each floor. It was used for laundry and supplies back when the house had live-in staff. Is it functional? Structurally sound, according to the inspection report from 6 months ago. But it's narrow. Maybe 2 feet by 2 feet. Lorien assessed the shaft, then looked at Kai. You first. You're smallest, and we need you in the basement to guide us out. There's an old root cellar exit that leads to the woods. I noticed it on day 2. I can't fit through that, Tallis protested, eyeing the narrow shaft. You can if you have to, Lorien said firmly. And you have to, below them, a voice called out. Basement's clear. Nothing in the workshop either. Keep looking, the leader responded. Check the attic. Move, Lorien urged. Now. Kai dropped into the shaft first, using the old pulley system to lower himself carefully. His descent was quick and controlled, years of rock climbing translating to unexpected competence in confined spaces. Within 30 seconds, his voice came through the shaft in a whisper. I'm down. It's safe. Come on. Tallis looked at the narrow opening, fear evident on her face. I know it's tight, Lorien said quietly. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She took a breath, then nodded. Yes, arms first, then turn your shoulders. The shaft's wider at the bottom. Just don't panic, keep moving down. Tallis maneuvered into the shaft, her movements awkward but determined. Lorien fed the rope carefully, controlling her descent. She disappeared from view just as footsteps sounded on the attic stairs. Lorien didn't hesitate. He dropped into the shaft, pulling the access panel closed above him just as light flooded the attic space. The shaft was crushingly narrow, pressing against his shoulders, but he'd been in tighter spaces in Afghanistan. He descended rapidly, hand over hand, ignoring the burning in his arms. Above, voices filtered down. Nothing in the attic. They're ghosts. No one disappears this completely. Boss wants them found. Keep searching. Lorien dropped into the basement, landing in a crouch. Kai and Tallis were waiting, pressed against the stone wall. Kai held up his tablet, showing heat signatures spreading throughout the house. They're systematic, Kai whispered. Checking every space methodically. We have maybe 3 minutes before they realize the basement has areas they haven't searched. Lorien moved to the far wall, finding the old wooden door that led to the root cellar. It was swollen with age and moisture, but he forced it open with his shoulder, the wood giving way with a muffled crack. The root cellar was exactly as he remembered, a long stone passage that angled upward, built into the hillside, with an exit that emerged near the tree line 50 yards from the house. It was designed for storing food in the days before refrigeration, taking advantage of the cool, stable underground temperature. They moved quickly through the passage, Lorien in the lead, Tallis in the middle, Kai bringing up the rear with his tablet, providing the only light. The stone walls pressed close, the air damp and heavy. Exits ahead, Lorien whispered. 30 feet. Behind them, a shout echoed through the basement. They were here. Find the access point. Move faster, Lorien urged. They reached the exit, an old wooden door covered in moss and dirt. Lorien put his shoulder into it, and it gave way, revealing the forest beyond. Afternoon light streamed in, temporarily blinding after the darkness of the passage. Go, Lorien commanded. Head north into the trees. There's a fire road about a quarter-mile up. We can use it to get distance, then circle back to the highway. To get distance, then circle back to the highway. They emerged into the forest, but before they could move, a figure stepped from behind a nearby pine. The fifth person, the perimeter guard. She had her weapon raised, trained directly on them. Nobody move, she said calmly. We can do this easy or hard. Your choice. Lorien assessed the situation in a fraction of a second. The woman was professional, stance solid, finger on the trigger, but not squeezing. She was waiting for them to comply, not eager to shoot. That was her weakness. Easy, Lorien said, raising his hands. We'll do it easy. The woman relaxed incrementally, a mistake born of assumption. Lorien moved, years of military training compressed into explosive action. He swept sideways, out of her line of fire, closing the distance before she could track him. His hand struck her wrist, redirecting the weapon skyward as it discharged, the shot echoing through the forest. His other hand found pressure points, and she dropped, unconscious, before she could call out. Run! Lorien grabbed the weapon, ejecting the magazine and tossing both into the undergrowth. They sprinted into the forest, branches whipping past, the sounds of pursuit erupting behind them. Voices shouted. More shots fired, but wild, unfocused. The trees provided cover, and Lorien used every trick he'd learned in hostile territory, changing direction unpredictably, using terrain for concealment, leaving false trails. Kai kept pace despite his usual physical reluctance for running, adrenaline overriding his typical sensory aversions. Tallis ran with surprising speed, her college track training evident in her form and endurance. They reached the fire road, and Lorien made a quick decision. North, then east. Circle wide. They'll expect us to head straight for the highway. They ran for another 10 minutes, the sounds of pursuit fading. Finally, Lorien called a halt in a dense thicket where they could catch their breath, and assess. Kai checked his tablet. Signals back. We're out of jammer range. He pulled up a map. Highway's 2 miles east. If we cut through the valley, we can reach it in 40 minutes. Tallis leaned against a tree, breathing hard but controlled. Who were they? Don't know yet, Lorien said, checking behind them for signs of pursuit. But they were professional. Military or private security background. This was a coordinated operation. To kill me? Maybe, or to take you. Either way, we're not sticking around to find out. They moved again, more carefully now, using the forest for cover. Lorien's military training dictated their path, avoiding open areas, staying in cover, moving silently despite their exhaustion. As they neared the highway, Kai's phone buzzed. It's your security team, he said to Tallis. They're trying to reach you. Tallis took the phone. We're alive. Thornfield Estate, we were attacked. Send everything you have to our location. She rattled off GPS coordinates from Kai's map, then ended the call. Help's coming, she said. 20 minutes. They found a sheltered position off the highway, hidden but with a clear view of approaching vehicles. Lorien kept watch, every sense alert for threats. Tallis sat beside Kai, both of them processing what had just happened. You saved us again, Tallis said to Lorien quietly. How many times is that now? Who's counting? He didn't look away from his vigil. I am. She moved closer to him. You could have left us. Taken the exit yourself. Gotten away clean. But you didn't. That's not who I am. I know. Her voice was soft. That's exactly my point. The security convoy arrived exactly 20 minutes later. 3 SUVs, heavily armed personnel, and the team leader Lorien recognized from Tallis's earlier video calls. They were extracted quickly, bundled into the center vehicle, and driven at speed back toward the city. In the safety of the moving vehicle, with professional security surrounding them, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the shaky aftermath of crisis. Kai was the first to speak, his voice small. I don't want to go home. Lorien pulled him close. We're not going home. Not until we know it's safe. Tallis made a decision. You're coming with me. Both of you. I have a secure building in the city, corporate housing with security that makes Fort Knox look accessible. You'll stay there until this is resolved. We can't just move into your life. Lorien protested. You're already in my life, Tallis said firmly. And I'm in yours. We're past the point of pretending otherwise. She looked at both of them. You've saved me twice now. Let me do this. Let me keep you safe. Kai looked at his father, then at Tallis. Pattern recognition says she's right. We're connected now. Fighting it doesn't change that. Lorien felt the last of his resistance crumble. They'd crossed a line today, moving from circumstantial connection to chosen commitment. In the chaos and danger, they'd become something more than acquaintances, more than friends. They'd become family, the kind forged in fire and trust. Okay, he said simply. We'll come with you. Tallis's relief was visible. She reached across the seat, taking Lorien's hand in hers. He didn't pull away. Through the tinted windows, the city appeared on the horizon, rising against the afternoon sky. They were heading into Tallis's world now, into the complexity and danger that surrounded her. But they were heading there together, and somehow, that made all the difference. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of Tallis's headquarters building in downtown, Ashford Heights. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, but heavy security shutters could seal the space in seconds. Biometric locks, armed guards on every floor, and a private elevator that required 3 levels of authentication made it one of the most secure residences in the state. Lorien stood at the window, watching the city lights blur into constellation patterns against the darkness. Behind him, Kai had claimed a quiet corner room and was already setting up his study space with the methodical precision that helped him feel grounded. Talis was on another security call, her voice carrying from the adjacent room, controlled but strained. 3 days had passed since the attack at Thornfield. The federal investigation had identified the attackers as hired operatives, part of a larger network attempting to destabilize Talis's company. Nadira had been one piece of a more extensive conspiracy, and the people behind it were still at large. Lorian's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but the words made his blood run cold. "We know about Kandahar. About what you did. About what you lost. How long before the boy learns the truth?" His hands tightened around the phone. The past he'd buried, the part of himself he'd left behind when he became Kai's father, was surfacing like a body rising from deep water. Talis entered the room, stopping when she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" He handed her the phone without a word. She read the message, her face hardening. "This is them. Whoever's behind the attacks. They're trying to get to me through you now. It's working." Lorian's voice was hollow. "They know things I've never told anyone. What happened in Kandahar?" Lorian moved away from the window, the weight of old memories pressing down on him. "I was Special Forces, embedded with a local unit. We had intelligence about an insurgent safe house. The information seemed solid, vetted through multiple sources. We moved in at dawn." He stopped, his jaw working. Talis waited, not pushing, just present. It wasn't a safe house. It was a family compound, civilians. By the time we realized the intelligence was false, planted specifically to create an incident, 3 people were dead. A father trying to protect his home. His wife. Their teenage daughter who ran toward the gunfire instead of away from it. Talis's hand went to her mouth. "Lorian, I fired the shots." His voice cracked. "I was following protocol, responding to perceived threats, but I killed them. The investigation cleared me, said I acted appropriately given the intelligence provided. But appropriate doesn't change what happened. Doesn't bring them back." How old was the girl? 16. Same age Kai is now. Lorian's eyes were distant, seeing the past. "After that, I couldn't stay. Couldn't keep following orders that might put me in that position again. I took early discharge, came home, tried to disappear into ordinary life. Then Kai came along, this teenager who'd been abandoned and abused, and I saw a chance at something like redemption. A way to save someone the same age as the girl I couldn't save." Talis moved closer but didn't touch him, respecting his space. "Does Kai know?" "He knows I was military. Knows I left under difficult circumstances. But the details, the full truth, I couldn't tell him." "How do you explain to someone that you're the reason a family died? That every time I look at him, part of me sees her face?" "That's not fair to either of you," Talis said gently. "He's not her. You're not the same person you were, aren't I? I still react on instinct, still default to violence when threatened. You saw it at Thornfield. I took that woman down without hesitation. You protected us. That's different from what happened in Kandahar, is it?" Lorian finally looked at her. "Or is it just violence I can justify to myself?" Before Talis could respond, Kai's voice came from the doorway. "How long have you been standing there?" Lorian asked, his heart sinking. "Long enough." Kai entered the room, his expression unreadable. "You killed people in Afghanistan. A family. That's why you left the military." Lorian felt the ground shifting beneath him. "Kai, I can explain. You already did. I heard everything." Kai sat down, his usual careful composure intact. "You've been carrying this for years. Trying to save me as a way to balance what happened to her. Trying to save me as a way to balance what happened to her. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Kai looked at him directly. "You made a mistake. A terrible one. under false information, in a situation designed to create exactly that outcome. You've spent years punishing yourself, and somehow I became part of that punishment and redemption. Talus started to speak, but Kai held up a hand. I'm not finished. Dad, I'm not your redemption. I'm not a replacement for anyone you lost. I'm just me. And you don't get to carry guilt about my existence or our relationship because you think you don't deserve to be happy. Lorian's throat tightened. I don't know how to let it go. You don't let it go. You integrate it. Kai's voice was steady, wise beyond his years. It's part of your pattern now. You can't erase it. But you can choose what it means going forward. Does it mean you're forever broken? Or does it mean you understand the weight of choices and make better ones now? When did you become so wise? Lorian's voice was rough with emotion. I learned from watching you. You taught me that broken things can be restored, that damage doesn't mean worthless. You just forgot to apply that lesson to yourself. Talus knelt beside Lorian's chair. He's right. What happened in Kandahar was a tragedy. But it doesn't define your entire existence. You've spent years trying to atone, and maybe that's not what's needed. Maybe what's needed is to forgive yourself and keep being the person Kai needs. The person I need, without treating it like penance. Lorian looked between them. These two people who'd somehow become essential to his existence. I don't know if I can. You don't have to know, Kai said. You just have to try. That's what you always tell me. Try, fail, adjust, try again. Why should you be exempt from your own advice? Later that night, after Kai had gone to bed, Lorian found Talus on the balcony, despite the security concerns. She'd convinced the guards that 10 minutes of air was worth the minimal risk. Thank you, Lorian said, joining her. For what you said earlier. I meant every word. You're not the villain in your own story, Lorian. You're just human. Flawed like all of us. You're being generous. I'm being honest. She turned to face him. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Not a killer, not someone defined by one terrible moment. I see someone who showed up for a teenager nobody wanted. Who built a life around service and care. Who's saved my life twice now without hesitation. That's who you are. That's who I'm trying to be. Then keep trying. That's all any of us can do. She paused. I have something for you. She handed him a small box. Inside was a smooth river stone, painted with careful detail. On one side it said, then, on the other, now. Kai made it, she explained. He said you needed a reminder that time moves forward. That who you were then doesn't imprison who you are now. Lorian held the stone, feeling its weight, its smoothness. A physical reminder of an abstract truth. He'd spent years carrying Kandahar like a stone around his neck. Maybe it was time to carry it differently, not as a burden, but as a reminder of why every choice mattered. I'm going to write a letter, he said suddenly. To the family. Or what's left of them. The Afghan refugee organizations can help me find them. I can't change what happened, but I can acknowledge it properly. Stop hiding from it. Talus nodded. That's brave. That's necessary. He looked at the stone again. Kai's right. I can't erase the past. But I can choose what I do with it. They stood together in the city night. Two people learning to integrate their broken pieces into something whole. The conspiracy against them continued. Threats still loomed. But in this moment, they were simply present with their pain and their healing. Lorian pocketed the stone, feeling its weight settle comfortably. Then and now. Both true. Both part of his pattern. But now could be different. Now could be better. And with Kai and Talus beside him. Now could be enough. The Ashford Heights Community Center was packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled. People standing along the walls. The Voices of Courage speaking series had become a monthly tradition, highlighting ordinary people who'd done extraordinary things. Tonight's event, however, had drawn unprecedented attention. The woman who'd survived 2 assassination attempts, And the father and son who'd saved her were finally speaking publicly. Lorien had resisted for weeks. The last thing he wanted was more exposure, more attention. But Talis had made a compelling argument. Their silence was allowing others to control the narrative. Conspiracy theories flourished online. Media speculation ran wild, and worst of all, people were using their story to push various agendas they didn't support. "We tell it once, on our terms," she'd said. "Then we own it, and we can move forward." Now, sitting backstage, Lorien watched through a gap in the curtain as the moderator introduced them. Kai sat beside him, unusually still, processing the magnitude of what they were about to do. "You don't have to speak," Lorien reminded him. "Talis and I can handle this." "No." Kai's voice was firm. "I have things to say. People need to hear them." The moderator's voice carried through the space. "Please welcome Talis Corvain, Lorien Dravik, and Kai Dravik." They walked onto the stage together, a united front. The applause was immediate and sustained, people rising to their feet. Lorien felt exposed under the lights, every instinct telling him to retreat. But he felt Kai's presence beside him, steady and certain, and it anchored him. They sat in comfortable chairs arranged in a semicircle, the moderator between them and the audience. After the applause subsided, the moderator began. "Let's start with the obvious question. Talis, 2 attempts on your life in a matter of weeks. How are you processing that?" Talis's response was measured. "I'm processing it by refusing to let fear dictate my life. Yes, people tried to kill me. Yes, that's terrifying. But allowing that terror to paralyze me would be giving them exactly what they wanted. So I'm here, I'm speaking, I'm continuing my work. That's my answer to fear." "Lorien, you acted twice to save her, despite having no obligation to do so. What drove you to get involved?" Lorien considered his words carefully. "I spent years in the military learning to assess threats. But I spent years after that learning something more important, that the ability to act carries the responsibility to act. When I saw danger, I couldn't look away. None of us should be able to. And Kai," the moderator turned to him, "you noticed details others missed. How did you know something was wrong?" Kai's hands fidgeted slightly, but his voice was clear. "I see patterns differently than most people. My brain processes information in a way that highlights inconsistencies. At the gala, the assistant's behavior pattern was wrong. Too precise, too calculated. It stood out to me because I'm used to watching for things that don't fit. Some might call that a superpower," the moderator suggested. Kai's response was immediate and sharp. "It's not a superpower. It's a different neurological framework. Calling it a superpower is reductive. It suggests I'm special rather than simply different. And it ignores the challenges that come with processing the world this way." The audience was rapt, leaning forward. The moderator nodded. "Tell us about those challenges." "Imagine everything is amplified," Kai explained. "Every sound, every light, every social cue. Most people have natural filters. I don't. I have to consciously manage sensory input that others automatically regulate. Yes, that means I notice things. But it also means a crowded room can be physically painful. A change in routine can be destabilizing. There's no superpower without struggle." Lorien watched his son with pride and something like awe. Kai was giving voice to experiences he rarely shared, making visible what was usually invisible. Talis leaned forward. "Can I add something?" What Kai describes, that heightened awareness and the cost it carries, that's true for so many people who see what others miss. We celebrate the outcome but ignore the effort required to produce it. Kai saved my life, but we shouldn't ignore that being in that crowded gala was actively difficult for him. He showed up despite that difficulty, and that's the real courage. The moderator shifted direction. "There's been significant public interest in your relationship. 3 people from very different worlds, now deeply connected. How do you define what you've become to each other?" Lorien and Tallis exchanged glances. Kai spoke first. We're family. Not because of biology or legal documents, but because we choose each other consistently. Family is a pattern of showing up, of trust demonstrated repeatedly. That's what we have. Lorien, do you agree? The moderator asked, completely. I learned through Kai that family isn't about where you start. It's about who stays, who sees you clearly and doesn't leave. Tallis has become that for both of us. Tallis's eyes glistened. And they've become that for me. I built my entire identity around my company, around achievement and success. But these two showed me that connection matters more than accomplishment. That being seen, truly seen, is more valuable than any professional milestone. The moderator opened the floor to questions. Hands shot up immediately. A middle-aged woman stood. My son is like Kai, sensitive to sensory input, struggles in social situations. What advice do you have for parents trying to support neurodivergent teenagers? Kai answered before Lorien could. Ask them what they need. Don't assume. Don't try to fix them. My dad never treated my needs as problems to solve. He treated them as information to accommodate. That made all the difference. Information to accommodate. That made all the difference. Lorien added, stop viewing different as less than. Kai's brain works differently, and yes, that creates challenges. But it also creates capabilities. The goal isn't to make him normal. It's to help him thrive as exactly who he is. Another question came from a young man near the back. Tallis, you're a CEO, incredibly successful. How do you reconcile needing to be saved with the image of powerful independence? Tallis's laugh was genuine. I'm reconciling it by rejecting the premise. Needing help isn't weakness. We've created this toxic narrative that strength means never needing anyone. But real strength is knowing when you're in danger and accepting help when it's offered. I'm not less powerful because Lorien and Kai saved me. I'm more complete because I let them. The questions continued, each one probing deeper into themes of courage, connection, and chosen family. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. The moderator finally called for one last question. An elderly man stood, his voice carrying decades of experience. What do you want people to take away from your story? The three of them looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Lorien nodded to Kai, giving him the floor. Kai stood, moving to the front of the stage. I want people to understand that heroism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's noticing what others miss. Sometimes it's speaking up when your voice shakes. Sometimes it's accepting help when you've spent years believing you have to be strong alone. He paused, gathering his thoughts. My dad carries guilt about things he can't change. Tallis carries the weight of building and protecting an empire. I carry the challenge of existing in a world not designed for how my brain works. We all carry something. But we're learning that we don't have to carry it alone. His voice strengthened. The story isn't that we're special or extraordinary. The story is that we're human, flawed, and figuring it out together. And if we can do that, anyone can. You just have to be willing to see clearly, speak honestly, and stay when it would be easier to leave. The silence that followed was profound. Then, like a wave building, applause began. It grew until the entire room was standing, not just acknowledging their words, but affirming them. Recognizing their own struggles, their own need for connection, their own capacity for courage. Backstage. Afterward, the three of them stood together in the quiet. You did well, Lorien said to Kai. We all did, Kai corrected. That's the point. Tallis pulled them both into an embrace, something she'd have never done months ago. Thank you. For being willing to share our story. For trusting that it matters. It does matter, Lorien said. But not because we're special. Because we're honest about not having it all figured out. As they left through the back exit, avoiding the media waiting out front, Lorien realized something had shifted. They'd made themselves vulnerable publicly, exposed their struggles and uncertainties. And instead of weakness, it had created connection. The threats against them remained. The conspiracy continued. But they'd reclaimed their narrative, defined themselves on their own terms. That was its own kind of power god, and sometimes, speaking truth was the bravest act of all. The warehouse space in the industrial district of Ashford Heights sat empty and echoing. Raw concrete floors and exposed brick walls, speaking of decades of manufacturing before the factories moved overseas. Tallis had acquired it months ago, with vague plans for expansion, but those plans had dissolved in the chaos of recent events. Now standing in the vast space with Lorien and Kai, she saw different possibilities. What if we created something here? She said, her voice carrying in the emptiness. Not for the company, for us. For others like us. Lorien walked the perimeter, assessing the structure with a restorer's eye. What did you have in mind? A space for connection. For people who don't fit traditional molds. Neurodivergent individuals, veterans struggling with reintegration. Anyone who needs a place to exist without judgment. Talisa's vision was forming as she spoke. Workshops, quiet spaces, sensory-friendly design. A place built intentionally for those usually accommodated as afterthoughts. Kai's eyes lit up, already seeing the possibilities. Modular spaces that can be configured based on individual needs. Adjustable lighting, sound dampening. Areas for both collaboration and isolation. We'd need equipment, resources, Lorien said. But his tone suggested he was calculating possibilities, not objections. I can provide funding, Tallis offered. But I don't want this to be my project. I want it to be ours. Built by people who understand what's needed because they've lived it. Over the following weeks, the project consumed them in the best way. Lorien handled the structural restoration, his carpentry skills transforming the raw space into something warm and intentional. He built quiet pods with acoustic dampening, created flexible furniture that could be rearranged for different needs, restored the original wooden beams to bring character back to the industrial space. Kai designed the sensory systems, researching and implementing lighting that could be adjusted from bright collaboration modes to dim, comfortable settings for those who needed less stimulation. He created color-coded zones so people could understand the energy level of different areas at a glance. He built a library of noise-canceling equipment and weighted items that could be checked out like books. Thlisse applied her engineering background to the technical infrastructure while using her business acumen to establish the non-profit structure. But more than that, she learned to build with her hands alongside Lorien, to understand materials and craftsmanship in a way she'd never experienced in corporate boardrooms. One afternoon, 3 weeks into the project, they took a break, sitting on the floor surrounded by sawdust and partially assembled furniture. This feels different than building a company, Tallis observed, wiping sweat from her forehead. More personal, because you're building for people you know, Lorien said, sanding a piece of reclaimed wood that would become a window seat. Including yourself. That changes the stakes. Kai looked up from the tablet where he was programming the lighting system. It's creating space for our patterns to exist. Not asking patterns to fit into predetermined space. Exactly, Tallis smiled. My whole career, I've worked within existing frameworks, trying to innovate inside established boxes. This is different. This is building the box around the need. They worked late into evenings, the warehouse becoming a second home. They developed rhythms and traditions, morning coffee before starting, lunch breaks where they'd sketch new ideas, evenings where they'd assess progress and plan the next day. The physical work was demanding, but it was also healing, creating something tangible and meaningful with their own hands. Local news got wind of the project, but this time, the attention felt different. This wasn't about assassination attempts or heroic saves. This was about creation, about using their unexpected platform for something constructive. A reporter visited, documenting their work. Why this project? She asked Tallis. You could do anything with your resources. Tallis gestured to Kai. who was teaching a group of volunteers how to install the sensory lighting. Because my son showed me that the world isn't built for everyone. And because my partner taught me that restoration isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about revealing what was valuable all along. The reporter noted Talisa's words. My son. My partner. The language of family. Used without hesitation. As opening day approached, they held a soft launch, inviting people from support groups, veteran organizations, and neurodivergent communities. The response was overwhelming. People moved through this space with wonder, discovering nooks designed for their specific needs, finding spaces that welcomed their differences rather than merely tolerating them. One veteran, tears in his eyes, told Lorian, I haven't felt this comfortable in public since before deployment. You built a space that understands. A mother with her teenage son, who shared Kai's sensory sensitivities, approached them. He's smiling, she said, her voice breaking. He never smiles in new places. He's always overwhelmed. But here, he's comfortable immediately. Kai spent time with the teenager, showing him how the systems worked, giving him agency over his environment. You can control everything, Kai explained. Light, sound, even temperature. The space adapts to you. You don't have to adapt to it. That evening, after everyone had left and they were cleaning up, Lorian found Tali standing in the center of the space, slowly turning to take it all in. We did it, she said softly. We actually built something that matters. You sound surprised. I am a little. I've built $1 billion company, revolutionized data security, achieved everything I thought defined success. But this feels more significant than all of it. Lorian joined her, Kai completing their circle. Because this wasn't about achievement, it was about service. About creating space for people to exist fully. It's also about us, Kai added. We built this for others, but we needed it too. A place where all our patterns fit together. Talis reached out, taking both their hands. I want to tell you something. Both of you. Before recent events, I was successful but empty. I had everything I thought I wanted and nothing I actually needed. You changed that. You showed me what connection looks like, what family means. This space, it's not just for others. It's a physical representation of what you've built in my life. What we've built together, Lorian corrected. None of us did this alone. They stood in their creation, this space born from crisis and forged in collaboration. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, unaware of the small revolution happening in this converted warehouse. But inside, 3 people who'd found each other in chaos had created something enduring. A place of welcome. A space of understanding. A home for those who'd never quite fit anywhere else. And in building it, they'd discovered something essential. That the greatest things we create aren't the ones that showcase our individual talents, but the ones that emerge when we trust each other enough to build together. The warehouse would open officially next week, but in truth, it was already complete. Not because the construction was finished, but because its purpose had already been fulfilled in the building process. They'd set out to create space for others and ended up finding space for themselves. They'd meant to serve a community and discovered they'd become one. Sometimes, the most important work we do isn't the work itself. It's who we become while doing it together. The grand opening of the Pattern Project arrived on a crisp Saturday morning, 6 weeks after that first conversation in the empty warehouse. Local news stations set up cameras outside, but the event wasn't designed for spectacle. It was designed for meaning. Inside, the transformed space hummed with quiet energy. Soft lighting created pockets of warmth throughout the open floor plan. Quiet zones with acoustic dampening offered refuge for those who needed it. Collaboration areas invited connection for those who sought it. The air smelled of fresh wood and possibility. 300 people had been invited, veterans, neurodivergent individuals and their families, community organizers, and anyone who'd ever felt the world wasn't built for them. They arrived tentatively at first, testing the space. discovering its intentional design. Lorien stood near the main entrance, greeting people personally, watching their reactions. A combat veteran paused at the threshold, overwhelmed by the sensory-friendly lighting. "I can actually breathe here," he whispered. Kai moved through the crowd, demonstrating the control systems, empowering people to adjust their environments. His usual discomfort in crowds was absent. This was his space, built with his understanding, and it showed in his confidence. At noon, they gathered in the central commons for brief remarks. Tallis took the microphone, but instead of her usual CEO presence, she spoke simply and personally. "This space exists because 3 strangers became family through crisis. Because we learned that our differences weren't weaknesses to overcome, but strengths to embrace. We built this for you, but we also built it for us. A place where every pattern is valid, every way of being is welcomed." She gestured to Lorien and Kai to join her. They stood together, a family forged in fire, now creating space for others to find the same acceptance. "This isn't just a building," Lorien added, his voice steady. "It's a promise that you belong exactly as you are, that your needs matter, that there's space in this world for every way of existing." Kai spoke last, his words simple but profound. "We see you. We built this because we see you." The applause that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was reverent, grateful, the sound of people recognizing they'd been given something rare, a space that understood them completely. 18 months after the gala that changed everything, Lorien stood in the Pattern Project's workshop, teaching a Saturday morning restoration class. Veterans and neurodivergent adults worked side by side, learning to bring broken furniture back to life. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone. Kai was in the tech lab, leading a coding workshop for teenagers who thought like he did, who saw patterns others missed. His confidence had grown exponentially, not because he'd changed, but because he'd found his people. Tallis split her time between running her company and expanding the Pattern Project. 3 more locations were opening across the country, each one built on the same principle: spaces designed for people, not despite their differences, but because of them. The conspirators who'd tried to kill her had been caught, tried, and convicted. The threat was over. But the impact of that threat, the connections it had forged, those remained. That evening, they gathered in the penthouse for dinner, a weekly tradition now. Lorien cooked while Kai set the table, and Tallis worked on grant proposals for the next Pattern Project location. Ordinary routines that felt sacred in their consistency. "I got a letter today," Tallis said during dinner, "from a mother in Seattle. Her autistic son visited our space there. She said it was the first place he'd ever felt completely comfortable in public. She called it a miracle." "It's not a miracle," Kai said, "practical as always. It's intentional design meeting actual need. Maybe miracles are just intention meeting need," Lorien offered. They sat in comfortable silence, these 3 people who'd saved each other in different ways. Tallis had a family now, not built on corporate achievement, but on genuine connection. Lorien had released his past's grip, learning that redemption wasn't earned through suffering, but through service. Kai had found his voice, and a world that listened. Later, as city lights sparkled below, Lorien pulled out the painted stone Kai had made months ago. Then, on one side, now on the other. "Still carrying that?" Tallis asked. "Always. It reminds me that we're not trapped by our beginnings. That now can be different, better." Kai joined them at the window. "We started as strangers in crisis. Now we're family by choice. That's the pattern I like best." Tallis pulled them close. "Me too. Sometimes salvation arrives in whispers, in observations others miss, in the courage to act when it would be easier to look away. Sometimes family isn't found in blood, but in the people who stay through crisis and choose you in the calm that follows." Their story had started with danger and heroism, but it had become something deeper, a testament to the truth that broken pieces, when fitted together with care and intention, Create something stronger than anything that was never broken at all. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, 3 people who'd found each other when they needed it most had built something that would outlast them. Not just buildings or programs, but a legacy of seeing clearly, speaking honestly, and staying when it mattered. Home wasn't a place. It was this. It was them. It was the pattern they'd created together, and it was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.